I'm Amanda, the CEO of and co-founder of AI for Education. Really excited to have you here. This is a really cool topic, I think, because I can help share the PD strategies and best practices that I have seen in doing this work around the country, and not only the country, but we've now done this work in the UK, Australia, and in the US. And so, really excited to have you all here. As always, like really want this to be something that we do together. I know I can't see your faces, but I know you're here and I'll be watching the chat as much as I can on my own. But we always want you to be involved. Like the thing that one of the things I love the most about our webinars is that there's such a strong community that comes and talks, and the chat themselves become a resource. So please engage with each other. If you have a great PD strategy that you've used, please share it. If you have a question, there's going to be someone in that audience that's going to be able to help you out. So please do that. We're going to do some prompting at the very end because we just launched two new prompts around PD itself. So we'll do some prompting together. But then also, if you have a great resource, I know some people out there do, please share it with each other. Right now, it's actually pretty funny. I'm at Microsoft in New York City, kind of in a corner at the EdTech Week conference. It's just been really interesting because it's been really focused on what is happening not only in AI, but just a general education ecosystem. And it's been really interesting to see what's resonated with people, what kind of tools are being developed. But also, I've been really surprised by how little we're talking about kind of AI literacy itself, and also about how are we preparing our teachers for this new technology because we know that school is changing around us. And so I'm really excited to have you all here. So we have a couple more coming up. I'm doing another one on my own next week for prompt engineering. We'll really get into like how we build our prompts and how you can use that in your own practice. We're doing one with Harry Pickens from the Facebook group that you might all be in on top mistakes educators make. And then I have some really cool ones coming up, including some more AI ethic panels, specifically with students. We have a lot of really good stuff coming. So just look out for that in our newsletter. And so I want to start with where are we? Okay, so we talk about PD, professional development around generative AI. I wanted to situate us first in this idea of what is happening across not just the US, but the world. And we published this, I think, about a month or change ago. And it's quite funny. The first version we had, so Dan, my co-founder, built this, and this is actually an ostrich with its head in the ground, and it said ignore. And I was like, you know what, maybe a little bit too strong. But what's happening is we are seeing this like really large group of people and educators and leaders that are kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. And so we're in this position where today I was talking to superintendents, a group of superintendents from 7 different geographic locations, sizes, socioeconomic statuses, and approaches and adoptions of AI. And not one of them had an AI policy. Not one of them had a formal approach to AI literacy training. And so they're in this position where they're waiting. And what we know is that the waiting is causing this uncertainty. And so schools or systems are not creating the space in which people can learn together and normalize this new technology. So we know that that's happening. I would say that the vast majority of schools our systems are waiting to see what happens before they're creating these spaces in which we can develop this literacy. The second is banning, and we still see that happening. New York City blocked ChatGPT last year and have opened it again, which is really great, but it's still actually school by school that it becomes unblocked. And what we see with banning is that it's actually quite funny. You can potentially ban ChatGPT, but there are all kinds of other tools like, we've got Claude, we have Bard, we have Bing, but you may not have heard of Perplexity or Character AI, or know that Meta is releasing 28 agents that are developed and for students that have colorful personalities using their languages. So the idea of banning a tool is becoming less and less possible as generative AI is becoming such a huge part of our lives. So that's ban. We then have this idea of self-guided. And so a lot of you here may be in that boat right now where your schools or systems have said, go and try and bring back what worked. And we actually think that that's a good step in the right direction. But it can also like create the space in which we have uneven adoption of these tools and uneven awareness. And potentially what we're doing is we're causing inequities within that system as well, where you have some teachers that really are, deeply like engaged in this work and their students are learning it, where others have not really had the opportunity to learn together and that their students aren't having that same opportunity. And then the final is that school-wide adoption, institution-wide. I know we have some higher ed folk here. And so this is the idea of like having, even if it is initial and even if it is simple, these simple guidelines that also include like AI literacy training as part of this. Like, how are we upskilling our system so that we are able to learn together, to adopt responsibly, to find value, to make school better? I mean, the thing I would love to do, and I talk about this a lot this week, is like, wouldn't it be great if we actually created a technology that made schools better? Like, I don't know if I've ever seen that, but I really have a strong optimism that that is what's going to happen if we all come together and build that AI literacy together. So when I think about the best practices for the PD that I've run, and we're all going to have our different levels of experience running PDs and your favorite activities or resources that you use. And so I'm really couching this in what I think is really important about specifically teaching generative AI to teachers and school leaders. And it also works for students, but we're kind of focusing on professional development today. So the idea of like what I think those best practices are is first is we want to build capacity, not expertise. And the reason why I say about building capacity versus expertise is that AI is developing at a speed to which never before has been possible. And so when you think about being able to track that and to be able to understand that ChatGPT will be multimodal in 2 weeks, or there are, Gemini, the new, and I'm going to say a lot of words, but Gemini, the new Google tool is coming out and it's supposed to rival ChatGPT, that there are all of these things that are moving very quickly. And so we don't want to focus on this like speeding train that is hard to keep up with. What we want to focus on is how do you build the capacity of understanding and knowledge about how these systems work, what they do, and the comfort in at least getting started and using it for your own practice. So we don't want a whole bunch of experts, but we want a whole bunch of people that are familiar and have at least the capacity to understand and use these tools. So that's number one. Number two is we want to create a common understanding. And so I smile at this because this is actually a thing that I think is important all the time. And you may have heard me say this before, but I used to in Australia, when I was running an ed tech there, is I used to go to like different schools or systems and I would ask, does everyone here in your school community have the same understanding and definition of learning? And never once did I have a room where someone said yes. And if I went and did a family feud where I went to 100 people in the street and asked what schools are for, they would say learning. And so something as simple and as foundational as learning, we often don't take the time to build a common understanding of what that looks like, what it means, why it's important. And so what I want us to do today and think about when you take this back to your context is how do you create a common understanding so that people are talking about AI in the same way, that they are able to communicate what this means, that they are using the same words, that when they say AI, they mean the same thing that you mean, that when they think about this, they don't just think ChatGPT is AI, they actually understand that this is the whole field. But that common understanding, taking the time at the early stage that we are, I think is such a great like way to get started and is a really good goal and something that you can do like a straw poll after you do this session. Go and ask everyone, like, what does AI mean to you? Like, what are the three most common tools, or like, how do these tools work, and see what people say. So that's number two. Number three is going to be looking at providing time for teachers to speak about their concerns. And so we sometimes will just completely bulldoze people with new AI. I'm not gonna say AI, but new tools and tips and science of reading and differentiation and all these, really important words and jargon. But what ends up happening is like we don't give people the time to actually identify how they're feeling and what their questions are and their concerns. And right now, the concerns that people have are valid. These tools are very, very unreliable. They can be unsafe and they can definitely be harmful. And so I think it's really important that we give time. We don't wait till the end, but we actually really head on provide this constructive way to talk about concerns so that they are listened to, they are validated, but they're also used to become part of a really constructive conversation. So that's number three. And the last one is, I say this all the time, is show, not tell. I mean, it's so important. In almost every webinar that we've done, and now we're on 15. Oh my goodness. Sorry, Dan, you're never going to have a Wednesday night again. But, we have this opportunity and we've seen that like we always integrate some kind of, or try to, some kind of prompting or resource or guide, because it's so important to show not only the capabilities, but also the limitations. Because it's very hard to talk about these tools because it isn't something that we've seen before. And so the best way to do that is to actually show. So we'll be able to share this with you all after. So if you want to see this, absolutely, reach out and let us know, and we'll make sure to follow up with this tomorrow. And so the way that I wanted to situate today is the most important starting place for a PD is this intro PD. And so we have an intro to generative AI that we've now done in, oh man, about 20 different contexts, as well as like, from big districts to small districts, from schools to associations to keynotes, all kinds of things. And I kind of always have the same format. And it stuck pretty much from the very first time I did this, at a Moses Aheda school in Queens, New York. Shout out to Moses. And it's pretty much stayed the same. And the way that I structured this was starting with a place, which we're going to do in a moment, which is the AI in your pocket. Like we use this, it's a short activity. You can do this in your own context pretty easily, about connecting what AI has been, what has technology been, and then how it has changed. And so we start with there, and we start with that kind of grounding piece that this is not a new technology. This is a technology in the sense of the underpinnings have been around for years. And when I say years, I mean decades, not like tens of years, like not ones of years. And so it's a really good place to ground this in. This is something that's been there before. And it's just a major development that was a little bit faster or a lot faster than we anticipated. The second is like, what is generative AI? And we're gonna go into this as well, but always want to kind of keep this, if it's a 60 to 90 minutes, I don't actually spend 20 to 30 minutes on the deep technical aspects of generative AI. And I don't fill it with jargon, and I don't spend a lot of time trying to get people to repeat or recall what these tools are, how they're developed, or like how they're ultimately technically built. And the reason why I don't do that is it's actually not that important. Remember, we're not trying to build expertise, we're trying to build capacity. So what I do instead is I focus on how it works, but also what it can do and what it can't do. And so that really helps in terms of kind of creating the space in which we have a better understanding of what these tools are. And so, but I really suggest that if you have a PD, don't bury everyone in a lot of tech talk. If people really want to do it, absolutely. There's so many great readings, there's so many great resources out there. But for our general, like, making sure that people are engaged and on track and getting what they need from this, we really don't want to spend too much time on that technical aspect. The third, you're probably not surprised, is prompt engineering. Let's see the value. That's show, not tell. And we like our prompt library. It's really cool. So TFA had a couple of had a PD last night, and they used our prompt library, which is super cool. We know that it's been accessed from around the world. It's a great place to start because it's meant to be a pedagogical tool or andragogical tool as much as it's meant to be a productivity tool, because it can be used in multiple ways on any type of chatbot. And it's also showing you not just how to create one for yourself, but also one that you can just cut and paste right in. And so I think that this is really important, to be able to show and to one of our attendees' questions about how do you support their understanding of what's inaccurate or what we call hallucinations, is by showing them a hallucination where a prompt doesn't work. And so like word count or something, which we'll talk about a little bit more in terms of what can you show on those two ends of like amazing, spectacular, and like fails every time and can be pretty laughable that someone will remember. And then the final piece is, again, if you know us, we love we love and really care about AI ethics. I've gotten really boring. I talk about this a lot, but it's really important to always situate this also into sharing guidelines and resources for students and teachers about how they can work together and understand how to responsibly use this. And I think that this is really important, is that responsible adoption of these tools is something that needs to be not just a teacher or a leader saying this is how to use it, but students understanding why it's so important that to actually use these tools responsibly. And whether that's because it has potential for cognitive offload in important ways, or that it's unethical, or it's unsafe. And so I think that you always want to kind of wrap it in that idea of responsible adoption. And so it's really quite nice. And I just want to kind of, I love everyone I know, and that like a lot of great people in the audience, but just kind of pulling out some things that have been that people have said, like Vera. So Vera is out in, I think North Carolina, and she's doing this work at the district level. She's going around, and she said, like, you see, like if a teacher uses a prompt for the first time and it really works, they're really going to have this moment of like deep visceral understanding, and like the light bulb goes off. And I think, I mean, I've seen it. I was at a conference where, it was pretty early stage. So people, a principal walked by. I was like, do you want to learn how to use ChatGPT? And I wish I had a camera, because it was everything from the Amanda hands off, jazz hands, to mouth open. This is amazing. It's going to transform how I do things. And because it's that show not tell that's so important right now. And then if but always with that like responsible optimism piece, where you're going to say, yes, it's great, but also you really need to understand its limitations as well. So next part I want to kind of move to is here's the AI in your pocket. So I can't see you all, but luckily I know some faces in the crowd. But what I always do is, like, whether it's in person or not, I start every session with, I'm blurred, but I have my phone here with my cool picture of Mount Fuji. Oh, you can see it. There's, like, I was in Japan last year, and so got Mount Fuji and the maple trees, which is beautiful. And what I say is, like, so I have just opened my phone with my face, and I could be wearing a hat or sunglasses. And so this is an example of how AI has already been part of my life. And so that's something called computer vision, that allows, it's more classical in the sense of it's a deterministic piece. It learns like my facial structure. And then even if it's slightly variant, like that hat, it's going to be able to open based on that. And you might have one with your thumbprint or others, but this is an opportunity of actually understanding that AI is already in your pocket. It's been part of our lives. And so I don't know, like, what I would say if it was, we were doing a PD right now, and if you play along with me and say, okay, so if that's an example of AI that's already been here, and you can't say ChatGPT, but what's another example of AI that you already have in your phone? I'll give everybody just a minute to do that. If you don't mind putting it into the chat, what is another example of AI that already is part of your life? Give everyone just a minute to play along. You didn't know you'd have to play along, but you do. And so love it. Predictive text, absolutely. Siri, Spotify does a good job of being able to, like, your Discover Weekly. Got Grammarly, Maps to plan a trip, Google Assistant, even your FICO score, Alexa, the algorithms in Netflix. Absolutely. Social media ads, absolutely. If it remembers that you were looking for that one pair of pants that one time, and then you see pants for the next, 3 years because you looked that one time, that's going to be an example of AI, an algorithm being able to follow you around. And so these are all examples of AI that already exists in our life, right? And so the difference, though, is that these are tools that have very specific inputs and outputs. And so they're called classical or deterministic AI. And so it means that it can predict what's going to happen next in a set of rules based on training. And so, sometimes it does it really well, and sometimes it doesn't. We all have experienced a really bad chatbot before the last 9 months, where you just wanted a representative and you kept saying representative and never got one. Like, that's an example of a very simple early stage non-generative AI tool. And so what I love about this is that you guys did a beautiful job. Thank you for playing along. But what you can do, though, is that you can see everyone, you have this understanding now that this isn't magic. It's not coming from thin air. But what it is it's building upon a body of work that's 70 years old. And it's something that chatbots are not, like I said, their first chatbots are like 50 years before us. IBM Watson is a generative AI tool that came out and beat Jeopardy 5 years ago. But what's happened is we're actually going to go here. What we've seen is, this is on our website. And Dan, if you don't mind dropping in the chat, but we have this really simple, Michael Kingston, who helped us build our curriculum, put this together as part of our student-facing curriculum. But what we have here is a very simple, and I talked about only wanting to spend a little bit of time, but you can talk about how AI is the big field, right? Machine learning is a lot of what we just talked about, which are going to be those these algorithms that allow a computer to learn from experience or data. without human programming, meaning like you teach it something and then it's able to recognize everyone's, mostly faces. Unfortunately, bias occurs and it's less good at minority faces, unfortunately. But you have this opportunity of like training something and then it learns and it's able to do with different inputs. You then have deep learning, which is really going to be the field which has allowed generative AI to exist, which is that idea that it's mimicking the human brain through neural networks and transformers as an example to allow computers to do much, much, much more complex tasks. And so this is the idea that these, it doesn't really work exactly like the brain, but it's using this idea of how brains are able to take many different centers and then generate new things. And so in this case, we have generative AI. And so generative AI, and we talk about ChatGPT or Midjourney, Bard, Gemini that's just coming out, is this ability to generate new text or audio images. The most common use case is going to be developing actual computer code. So a computer developing computer technology, very meta, is like that's where we have this really huge shift. And so this is an example of how you guys can bring that back to your school or institution and talk about what this looks like and really bring us down. So again, this is not magic. This is a computer program that is computing or predicting and not thinking, but it situates us in, again, this is a big body of work. And even though it might seem very scary and new, and it is, it's just that it happened really, really fast and we were not prepared. I'm always like, think it's so funny when you see like, technologists, talk about how it's extinction event and all these things. And one of the reasons why that reaction has happened is that, people thought that this was coming, but like 5, 10, 20 years in the future. And instead, when ChatGPT launched at the end of last year, and then more globally at the beginning of this year, it happened so quickly with so many more abilities than understood, is that we all had to kind of speed up to understand it very, very quickly. So I'm going to go backwards because I talked about this is the first part, right? The first and third part, AI in your pocket, and then like a couple minutes on like what this means in terms of like what is AI. The next piece is I'm just going to go back a slide is head on what are our concerns. So we do have myths and facts, and so this is actually a set of slides. And if I'm in person, I would have you stand up or sit down because I mean that way. I want you to be interactive. If you're online, we would do thumbs up, thumbs down, or M and F in the chat. But here are some examples of like common myths and facts, but also just to get deeply at what the concerns are. The first is around thinking like humans, and this is something in which it's kind of it's deliberately ambiguously worded because these are mimicking human, like the human interaction. They're actually designed, the UX and UI, that user experience is designed to feel like you're talking to like an intelligence. But in reality, what you have is that these are actually computing and predicting engines. And so while it mimics human experience, right? It isn't going to be human, like it isn't a human intelligence. It's not an intelligence. It's a predictive engine. And so what this does, that kind of allows people to understand that like it isn't magic and it's not Skynet. It's not Hal from Space Odyssey. It's not the Terminator. But what it is it's a really powerful probability engine that is meant and designed by the designers like OpenAI to feel like human interaction. So that's the first one we do almost always. The second is going back to that bias and ethics piece that I know AI is unbiased. And so I know a lot of people in here already. So I know that that AI is actually very biased because it's that probability engine, that predictive engine is actually trained on the internet. And, so ChatGPT 3.5 is trained on the internet of text. ChatGPT 4 is trained on the internet of text and images. And what's happened is, I don't know about you, but I don't think of the internet as a particularly unbiased place. And so, it's something that is absolutely going to be something in which we have these, like the responses that we get will have both explicit bias. So you can see those a lot, especially in image text to image creators where you can put in there's research that show me 100 judges what they would look like, and they come out where only 3% are women, but there are 34% of female judges in the US. So very easy to see, very explicit bias. But there's also implicit bias that where these tools are not just this, the first thing is they're very global north inspired. They are primarily English language and global north languages. They definitely have, when you think about it, also we have like no oral tradition or different types of voices. I think that I think about a lot when I think about why these tools are biased, and something I bring up in PDs is something like, the Swahili is spoken by like 80 million people. And then there's another language, Breton, that's spoken by 30,000. And there are as many Reddit pages in Breton as there are in Swahili. And so that's an example of like really interesting implicit bias where you have stuff like these disconnects. And Reddit was one of the main ways, like one of the key Reddit, sorry, Wikipedia, I meant Wikipedia, but Wikipedia is one of the main areas of training that you can see that there's going to be that bias implicit to this. So when you get a response, it's going to come with that bias, regardless if you're using the chatbots themselves or other tools built on top of them. The third one is a very common one. So I don't know if you've heard, but a lot of the rhetoric right now is AI is used for cheating. I don't know if you've heard that. It's only been said maybe 1 to 1 billion times in the last 9 months. But one of the things we want to acknowledge that actually students and teachers potentially can and will use these tools unethically. And then sometimes they're using them in ways in which maybe actually, maybe it isn't really cheating because it's just busy work or it's something that's become an outdated skill. But that there's this idea that these AI detectors work. And I'm telling you right now, when Turnitin says it's okay to have 0.7% false positives, which means that in 10,000 student responses, you're going to see 700 people be accused of AI written content. They say that's okay. Not only is it okay, but you can still purchase it, like you can buy it, knowing that those 700 are going to be students that probably are from non-English language backgrounds or really like purple prose and try to be their best to try to be perfectionists. But that they say that's acceptable. And I think that, it is something in which like Farah, they said they're like turn it in and shut it down, but they're still talking about it on LinkedIn. I met the copy leaks guys, everybody. People that know me know that I don't have I have no chill when it comes to ethics in this space. And so I met the guys that do copy leaks on the way to the elevator yesterday. And I said, I would love you to tell me how your tool works and how it's reliable. And so Shuvak, who's the leader, was very nice and he's going to talk to me about this. But I really think that this is something where we have to have these conversations with teachers about the fact that right now that they're not only are they not reliable, but they also are going to potentially be harmful to those that are non-native English speakers. And then the final one, you may have heard this as well, especially if you've been an educator for the last 20 years or an ed tech, is that, technology will replace teachers. And so AI will replace jobs like teachers, one we do quite a bit to get to that level of like existential questioning about what does this actually mean for my teaching? And, this one is really, really important to have a conversation because there are jobs already that have been downgraded or degraded now in fields already based on the ability of AI. And so teaching, there are definitely some areas of teaching that can be routinized or brought out of the normal workday by an AI tool already. And so this is something in which we do have to have these conversations about what does teaching become. But right now, there seems to be a very positive commitment to AI as a teacher augmentation tool versus AI as a teacher replacement tool. And so while we know that schools will have to change, it isn't a place yet that we are talking about replacement, especially if we really dig in and understand how we can change the way that school can be to make it better. So this is a really good example of another way that you can kind of head on. This is a constructive way to talk about concerns instead of it becoming this opportunity where everyone kind of talks, at each other. And, not that this would ever happen, but like I've been in a PD where people get like crosstalk, but it does it in a constructive manner that allows us to really get deep and understand these sessions, like what we're trying to understand and talk about. So I'm just going to move now to a couple of things relatively quickly. And Nicholas asked about like the singularity as a myth or fact. The singularity is this idea of like the way that the, technology will go so fast that it will outstrip our ability to understand it. And we're kind of at that point. I don't know, Nicholas, if I would really lead with that in a PD for teachers, especially not the first one, but definitely is for people that are thinking about that. There are usually a couple people in the world that room that will go there. For those people, I would definitely have a conversation about what that means. And because they're already kind of seeing around that corner of what does this mean that we're going to be able to not only have AI create new things for us, but also it's creating new technology that's also speeding up everything. Um, so just Bohan, about the idea of ChatGPT being potentially harmful. It's not ChatGPT, but AI detectors. There's research that shows that it actually has false positives more likely for students or those that are non-native English speakers. So if they're writing in English, they will be flagged as AI generated more commonly than their native English speaker peers. So that's what I mean. And I will put that in, I think Dan will put that in the email that comes after. Um, just to kind of move a little bit is that, we use this a lot around like the idea of a brainstorming partner, the idea of 80/20, the idea that these are not thinking tools, that these are tools that can supercharge your productivity and planning, but they require the right approach. And this idea that you need to be conversational, how you can use this, but also that you're always checking for hallucinations and bias. And that hallucination is when that predictive engine, that probability engine says, here's a citation or a URL that is completely made up because that doesn't exist because it doesn't even connect to the internet. So this is a great way to kind of get into what it actually is good at right now, which is written communication, lesson planning, brainstorming, refining text, translations. And even when I say formatting and structured data, I just mean like if you had like an observation notes, if you're a leader, you can have it remove the personally identifiable information, but you can use one of our prompts to use that to structure it and create a really beautiful formatted guide that helps you get that feedback to teachers more quickly. And then on the other side, there are some best practices that show like this is idea of like what you always have to check for. And so you need to check for the accuracy of what's happening. Like, is it hallucinating? You need to look at the starting point versus the final solution. If you're using a tool for like feedback or for lesson planning or for even a PD, what you want to do is you want to make sure that it's never a final draft. It's always going to need to be reviewed. You always need to have you as the expert. You are the expert in this loop. And so using that in terms of what the output is, the idea of knowing the limits of like these different tools. It doesn't do math. It can't do a word count. It doesn't have citations. It actually isn't thinking. It can't follow rules very well. But those are really important things to show. And we're going to do a little bit of prompt engineering in a moment, but I'll show you an example of one that I use in schools. And then the final thing is protecting privacy. Please never, like, you really want to make sure that your students, your teachers, your leaders are not putting personally identifiable information into these tools because they say like if they're being trained on it, you don't want that to be there. But sometimes these tools don't work as expected. And so we don't want a situation like what happened with the Samsung engineer where he used it to build a piece of code on intellectual property, thinking it was safe, and then it was actually given to someone else in another instance. Like these are new tools, and so it's really important to be as protective as possible. So we have this prompt framework, which we'll drop in the chat, which we won't go into a lot, but we have these tools because what I want to do is actually go and look at two examples of like, we have some great PD, we have some other pieces that we'll show, but I'm actually going to stop sharing and then share one more time. Share my screen. So you may have seen a prompt library and it got an update and a facelift this weekend. So we have now categories. We've added 12 new prompts. If Callie's here, thank you, Callie, who helped us put our prompt library together. But we have all kinds of different prompts. And so this is really great now for if you're in a PD and you're talking to administrators or you're doing one with literacy training. And then we have others that are going to be, like I'm just going to show you all really quickly. We won't have time today, but play around. Like I actually used ChatGPT to build that AI in your pocket. I was like, what are really good starting places for a PD? And I use this idea of the idea generator cut and pasted it in, like focused it on the kind of call to action, and then was able to build that out. Now I've used it all over, including with you. But we have these tools. But what I want to do is like this, the prompt library is a great example of how you can get people really started and seeing the possibility. And thank you to those that love our prompt library. Really appreciate it. Oh wait, guys, you know what's super cool? So the Jeff Rubenstein, who is the head of education at Google Cloud, on the main stage yesterday, he actually shouted us out and said AI for Education and their prompt library is a really good resource. So I met with him today, and that was pretty cool to see, someone that's building these things thinks that we have some value here. And I know that we've seen that in the work that we do. Isn't it cool? Like it's pretty awesome. Yeah, but here we have these examples. And, one of the ones that I always start with is those that are really simple and starting places. So whether you want to do a lesson hook, you want to do rubric, you want to do quizzes like critical thinking. Let's do critical thinking questions. I was really bad at questioning. And so I have to be honest, like as an early teacher, I did not ask questions well. And so we're gonna like go and use ChatGPT, and remember, we always create from like the non-paid versions. Always want to start a new context window so it remembers me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take if you've not seen it before, what we have is you've got this idea that it works with any chatbot. It also is like we have these like how to make it work for you. You actually always get to be in control. A lot of prompt layers out there allow you to hit a button and then it produces something, but you don't get to actually refine it. So we really like the fact that you can refine it, especially at the beginning stages of what you're doing. And it kind of keeps that control, but you're the expert. Remember, you are the expert in this loop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call them over and I'm going to put this in. It says you're an expert educator, instructional designer. So I'm priming it with our prompt framework. Create a list of 10 open-ended critical thinking questions for my 10th grade English class on the importance of using supporting documentation and argumentative essays. So I'm going to actually put this in, and remember, GPT 3.5 is our fastest model right now. What it's going to do is it's going to have this idea of here are top 10 open-ended critical thinking questions. And so why do you think it's important? How can you distinguish? And you can see like these are considered a topic where there might be conflicting evidence. How would you handle this situation when you're crafting your argumentative essay? Oh man, how great. That's a really good question. So I want to do for that one, this is where it becomes that control and they're like, oh, that's a good question. What you can do is now say for 7, provide some responses that students may have from different perspectives. So I can do some student exemplars, especially if I'm a new teacher. Okay, so you could some students may suggest that it's important to represent both sides, the idea of choosing the strongest evidence, address and refute. So interesting, right? But like this is the idea of like you can actually be prepared, but maybe if a kid or kids don't get there, you can kind of use good, prompting to actually get them to think about these pieces. So I really, really love this. And so I'm gonna do a similar one just with Claude to show you how it works. It's, I think it's not the best at some things, but it's starting to get better. I actually enjoyed, if you watched our video earlier this week, I enjoyed trash and trends as an opportunity to teach kids about fashion and recycling. And so what we can do is you see again, so they are open-ended. And what I can do now is I can kind of use these two tools in concert and I can ask the same thing again, where we have, I'm going to pick a different number. So how can um, oh, how about 9? Nine's a good one. How would failing to document sources? That's a great one. Love it. Um, and see, like we have some ideas of student responses and a little bit different. Like again, it's going to be like they're going to have different strengths and weaknesses. But this is an example of like where we've got some good examples of how we can do this. So that's a good example of how it works, like, and it's working. But I'm going to show I'm going to show where it fails. Because remember, we want to show the positives and we want to show the limitations and capabilities. And so I've done this live a couple times. And so remember, this is a predicting computing engine, not a thinking engine. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask it, create a mnemonic. You think I would be able to spell this now? Wait, did I do it? There we go. On Bloom's taxonomy. and rate your output. And so what we wanted to do is have the first letter of every word match Bloom's taxonomy. And what we're going to see is I'm asking it to rate its output as well. And so what it's done is it's also just given me the mnemonic. Actually, it's just the framework. It's actually not a mnemonic at all. This is always really fun. Like this is definitely not a mnemonic like Roy G. Biv, but it's giving itself a 7 out of 10 because I love what I love about this is that not only is it wrong, but it's extremely confident in its wrong answer. So I'm going to say this isn't correct um, because it's not a mnemonic device. Please, I always say, like, please do again. I'm one of the polite people and rate your answer. And so now, ooh, okay, so now we've got raging unicorns always attack evil. So at least a better. It's actually at least a bit more like this actually kind of works. What it's done is it's giving itself a worse rating. And so what you're going to see is that this is an example where you can show those limitations. ChatGPT does the worst job of identifying hallucinations, where it says something that looks correct but isn't. Or it does the rating. And if we do it one more time, I put this in, where we're going to see is another answer because the temperature of this, I saw someone writing about temperature is very high. And so in this case, what you're going to notice is it's gone completely off track. Juicy, there's no J in Bloom's taxonomy. But it's given itself a higher rating. And so this is going to be that example of like how there are limitations. This again is not a thinking tool. So what I want to show an example of a tool that actually does, it's trying to show hallucination. So I'm going to provide 5 URLs for a lesson on argumentative essays. So we know that both ChatGPT current version and the free version and Claude are not connected to the internet. And so what's going to happen is you're going to notice is that you have right here these pieces, but immediately if you see down here, it's a little bit small. It's given a immediate warning that these links are most likely not true. And so what'll often happen is even though it's confident and it's giving you 5 essays, what it's done is they know that it's going to hallucinate when you ask that. So it's giving you an identification of where it is. So I always show this in a training. And so in this case, look, it's an empty link. But the best part of it is it looks like it's actually correct because it looks completely right, but it doesn't work. And so when we think about, again, here are these capabilities and here are these limitations. So you need to understand, and I'll go back to our slides, is that one of the things why we really love our our policy that we wrote for kids, this guy, is because it talks about hallucination and bias. It always talks about double checking your work. And when you're with teachers, I got a really good opportunity or a suggestion to create a version of this for teachers, which we will be doing. But it says like always look for the hallucinations and bias, always look for that. And it's going to specifically happen a lot around facts, quotes, or resources, especially if it's not connected to the internet. Something like this is going to be a really good example of like how you can say, okay, now that we understand the capabilities and limitations, like what we want to do now is like go into, what we're doing and having that be an opportunity to really deeply understand what's possible. And so Carl says about Bing Chat about tendency to hallucinate random leaks, even though it's connected to the internet. Google just released something that I really like, but so there is this idea that now you hit a G in Bard, and it will at least highlight what it can say is true based on some resources. And so I think that this is going to be something that's going to be more and more possible. Thank you, Aaron. Just like let me like see if I can share this. Aaron just put in Ruthless Elephants 8. Can you guys see this? Ruthless Elephants 8 Juicy Carrots. This is a great example of how you can have fun with AI. Someone talked about being nerdy. I'm clearly very nerdy, but like Aaron, I love how you take it even further. And so this is a really good example of like how you can make it fun, but that kid is going to remember, that that was wrong, or that teacher's going to remember that that was wrong, and that I need to be careful, and that I need to be a critical user of this technology. So this is kind of our usual stopping place, and I just really appreciate those that have joined us already. We'll stay on. I do have to go to a dinner in a couple, and like, so we'll end a little bit earlier than usual, but I wanted to just always say thank you. We have something that I love for you all. If you're, we appreciate your time and your attention. We have a bit of, always connect with me on LinkedIn. But we also have, Dan's going to put in the chat. We have a couple of questions that we'd love to ask because we're starting to think through how can we help at scale. Unfortunately, I can't be in all your schools, even though I'd love to, and I'd love to meet you all in person. So we're thinking about like trying to scale this and like actually creating like a certified train the trainer or other opportunities. So if you have a little bit of time, if you were be open to answering, that would be really great. And if you had to have to head off, please, that's okay too. We'll put this in the emails later. But I wanted to take this time, like we have 5 good minutes. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like me to answer? If not, I just hope you have a really good night, morning, evening, wherever you are. But if you have a couple questions, we can spend a little bit of time together. Yeah, so I don't know. Does anybody have any questions? We've got a couple in questions, but nothing. We had talked about the inaccuracies. This will be recoded. Gemini is going to be really interesting. So Gemini, I just talked to Jeff from Google, and he said it's much much better. There's also Ed Palm that's coming out that's for educated education as well. And then, so Carrie has a question. What are schools doing about terms of use saying students have to be of a certain age? Okay, man, that's a really important question. 13 and up for ChatGPT and Bard and Bing with parental permission. Perplexity says the same thing. Claude is 18 and up. We really say that at this stage, because the technology is extremely early stages and can be unreliable and harmful, to be very careful with letting students of younger ages, knowing that they're going to be using it in different places like Meta or Instagram or TikTok. So what we suggest is we have this guide that we're building that it's much more about together. So actually getting up in front of the classroom and doing this together, having kids prompt with you. We have a great new prompt about imaginary friends or creatures that students can get involved with. And I know that there are some people that are really starting to talk about AI with kids as young as grade 1 and 2. But there's a difference between building this kind of knowledge and understanding of like what it works and then letting them loose into these not fit for purpose tools that are going to at times be inappropriate, that we show hallucinate. So there's a difference between guided tools. And I think that we're going to see more and more tools on market that are going to have protections in place that make them safer. Like I said, Google, I just talked to them today. They are saying that they're creating a version that is safer for kids. So we'll see that happening more and more. As so Michael we'll definitely be able to share the slides. So train the trainer would be great. We'd love it. Yeah, so thank you for everyone with the nice feedback. And so yeah, if you want to, we are scaling up. I mean, we're early stages, but we're definitely going to be looking for facilitators. But yeah, I just really thank you guys for joining and thank you. This is our 15th one. I just think that it's been so lovely. And the fact that I get to know you guys is really cool too. So I hope you have a wonderful evening, morning, wherever you are. It's so nice to have you be part of our journey. And yeah, I just really think that this is a great opportunity for us to work together. And good luck doing this in your own schools and contexts. But thanks, everybody. Have a really good wherever you are, and I hope to see you again.